I know you guys like shipping and logistics, but do you like to snack? If so, the host of the Shipping Pod has a brand new podcast. Fast snacks, fast food, fast reviews. Snack Masters Inc., a podcast served to you in 30 minutes or less. Available now at snackmastersinc.com, iTunes, Google Play, and everywhere podcasts are heard. Enjoy Season 2 of The Shipping Pod.
Prepare for takeoff, please.
It's The Shipping Pod. Season 2. Hello and welcome to The Shipping Pod. I am your host, Tim Dooner. Thank you for coming back for another episode of Season 2. Last week we talked about the Jones Act. Today we're going to be talking with none other than Jill Carney of Aborn and Company. But guys, before we get to that, did you see the Tesla Semi reveal? I hope that it doesn't have as many problems as the live stream did. I don't know if you guys tried to tune into that, but there were a lot of technical difficulties. However, they got the video up on YouTube afterwards. The truck looks phenomenal. It's like a silver bullet flying down the highway. You have to wonder though, how loud is this thing going to be? Or more importantly, how quiet is it going to be? Because I can imagine one of these sneaking up on you rather quickly. But they look fantastic. There are so many exciting things going on in the world of freight forwarding. This season's theme has been technology and how it is going to affect the industry. We're going to cover that truck in the future. Well, our guest today, she deals quite a bit with trucking, picking carriers for clients. Jill Carney of Aborn and Company. Today, she's going to answer some of those questions about technology and how it is encroaching on the freight forwarding marketplace in the future. But she is also going to talk about something that I often get a lot of questions about, and that is, what's the difference between a 3PL, a 4PL, and a consultant? These abbreviations tend to belie shippers and importers, exporters alike. So we hope to gain some clarity on that, because that is what she does. She is a 4PL/consultant. If you work in the New England area, there's a very good chance that you have had to present an RFQ to Jill before. She deals with a ton of different shippers, acting as matchmaker, putting them with the right carriers, the right 3PLs, the right warehouse management systems. They do bill auditing, they do benchmarking. Check them out, abornandco.com. Without further ado, in studio, Jill Carney. I'm here today with Jill Carney, partner at Aborn and Company. Jill, how are you today?
Doing great. How you doing? Thanks for having me.
Jill, it's Thanksgiving time. A lot of people are listening to this driving to relatives' house or staying home. My family, we switch off every year. My wife's family takes it one year. My family takes it the other. They're in Connecticut, so it's a travel year for us. What do you guys do on Thanksgiving?
Yeah, travel years are tough with babies.
They are.
Traveling with a lot of stuff. I usually host every year, but like you, this year we're switching off. So one of my brothers is hosting. But it's fun. We all have a pre-meeting. We assign who's bringing what, and then there's usually some kind of food competition. So I think this year it's stuffing.
Well, that's good. You don't want 8 people to show up with yams or something, right?
Yeah. No, not at all.
Yeah, I think I have pumpkin pie and stuffing this year. So I'm looking for, those are 2 of my favorites too. I've perfected the art of cooking them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm excited about that.
Yeah, it's fun. Good times.
Jill, why are you here today? Who is Jill Carney? A lot of people in Boston know who you are. I think they've worked with you in one way or another. Mm-hmm. Anybody who's probably on the broker side has been solicited for being a part of an RFQ or an RFP at some point.
Right.
What do you do right now? What is Aborn and Company?
So we are freight pricing experts and consultants. We help companies bring visibility to a supply chain, negotiate their transportation agreements, and, really solve some problems that they're having with their carrier base, whether they be asset or broker.
How long have you been with Aborn and Company?
So I started with Aborn and Company in 1993. And at that time, we were called PMC Logistics, which was Plymouth Management Company shortened up. Our office was down in Plymouth, Mass, right across the street from Plymouth Rock. And over the years, logistics, if you have logistics in your name, people tend to see you as a 3PL, which we're not, or a broker, which we're not. 2 years ago, we decided to change the name to Aborn and Company. Now, Aborn is our founder's last name, Russell Aborn. And if you hit our website, you'll see the story behind Russ's ancestors, who were also in the shipping industry. So we maintain his name, one for his reputation in the marketplace, and two for his story. It's a great story.
And that website would be abornandco.com, right?
Right. Yep. It's abornandco.com.
You bring up a good point here, because I think a lot of people, and I know when I was on the 3PL side, I believe you were at PMC Logistics at the time, so I think there was some market familiarity with there, but this is a split off. Or is it two different groups now? Are you both doing different things? Is Aborn its own entity? How does that work?
Right. So Russ founded the company, and we were all in Plymouth, and PMC Logistics were two other VPs. Russ sold the business and a handful of the clients, and they maintained PMC services, and we were PMC Logistics. But that office has recently been acquired by Transportation Insight. They're in our model, but I think they also do some 3PL and brokerage work as well.
When you were a little Jill, did you always dream of being in the logistics field, or how did you end up in this business? Because everyone seems to have an interesting story. I don't want to say people fall into it, but it's not something you think of. It's kind of a shadow world of logistics. I tell people what my job is. They seem to have no idea. And you point to the ships on the sea, or the trucks, the freight trucks bringing stuff to Target or Walmart. They kind of wrap around it. But again, it's not taught in school, so it's something someone has to lead you into. Right.
I absolutely fell into this industry. When I left high school, I went to school to be certified to work with kids. And I was in a daycare environment, running a daycare, and I just thought, this isn't a long-term solution for me. I'd like to get more into something strategic, something that might be fun, but I had no idea what that was going to be. And believe it or not, I had a girlfriend whose mom was an office manager at St. Johnsbury Trucking. And so that's where I started. And I was just in an admin role, helping support claims and operations, whatever it was. And I was there for a few years, and I ended up working with the national account rep. So I was supporting internally all of his national accounts. And PMC was one of them. So Russ, and at the time, Bernie, who was working with Russ, I would support their clients. So make sure their shipments were handled correctly, delivered on time, were claim-free, and any new type of work that was coming with them, whether they had a new product release or whatever was going on, I supported them internally. And so St. Johnsbury Trucking ended up closing its doors. And that's when I interviewed with Russ, and I started again in November of 93.
Yeah, and now you're a partner, so
right.
You've really grown through the ranks. But you mentioned something interesting. A lot of people, they work with a broker, they work with a 3PL, they hear terms like 3PL, 4PL, consultant. What's the difference?
It's really confusing, you're right. It becomes a big topic of discussion as we work with clients. When our sales efforts, we reach out to a company, they say, oh, we're already working with someone. The difference is, and our value is very different, we are true consultants. So the pricing that we negotiate for our clients is between the client and the carrier. Our fees are flat, and they're only paid by the client. We're not paid by carriers. We're not a broker, so we're not buying and selling transportation costs. We see ourselves as employees of our clients, and our job is to help them support that supply chain, logistics, procurement function as it relates to working with carriers. And for us, the definition of a carrier could very well be a 3PL, a broker, 4PL, depending on who you ask, you might get a different answer. I see a 4PL as someone who's managing a supply chain. So they're the broker's buying and selling transportation costs. A third-party logistics company may be doing the same, where they're getting paid on transactions. And they're also providing other services, whether it be a TMS or, other value adds. A 4PL is positioned to be the managed solution. But again, how they get paid could vary. So when Russ founded the company, he had a very clear vision that you work for who pays you. And if you're a broker and you're working for carriers and you're getting paid by carriers in any shape or form, that's who you work for. And then if you're in a 3PL or broker model and you're getting paid by the client and by the carrier, well, who's your client? So there's a little gray going on there, right? So our vision has always been we work for the clients only. We receive no commissions, no payments by carriers, nor are we upselling any freight. So we're not buying a truck for $1,000, paying a carrier and charging the client $1,200. We're truly working solely for the clients. And again, the fees are flat. The carriers like working with us for that reason. There's nothing hidden. The negotiation is on behalf of the client. The pricing is between the client and the carrier. Even if the carrier's a broker, it's an open book. The value we bring is to the client is we really understand the market. And depending on the industry, the market's very different. Because of our clients and because of where they are and because we're negotiating globally, we have a good pulse as to what's going on in the market. And we also have a good reach of the right carriers in the right lanes at the right price. So that's what the clients value. But there is value to the carrier. You know, we see it all the time where carriers are promised freight all the time that they never get. And they're constantly bidding and pricing, never really sure if any of this is going to come to fruition. And our strategy has always been you really put together a strong negotiation strategy and you see your carriers as your partners. They are the last people that deliver that product to your customer. They are a part of you, whether you see it that way or not. And we truly see it that way. So we work really hard with carriers to make sure they're in the right places. They're going to service the client the right way. It's crucial. You know, service is first. And if you don't have a provider that can do that, price means nothing.
I know on the 3PL side, and you kind of said it here or you hit it, what we would do in business development is we would go to X number of carriers, the ones with the lanes that we wanted to sell. We would promise them X number of volume for the year. Then our job was to go out and find cargo to put on those boats, aka clients. So those were our clients, and we would get a certain rate. We would put X amount on top of that rate, plus accessorials, plus whatever. And sometimes you'd visit a client, they would be getting great rates. Other times they would be getting completely awful rates, and that would be great because they would be easy to convert. So what you guys do is you oversee those rates. So you're looking at all their different carriers and you're seeing what's fair to the market.
Right. And really what we've seen in the market over the last maybe 10 plus years is with all this technology coming in and the pressure to reduce costs, the pressure to reduce inventory, that it becomes this rate shopping exercise, right? So just get me the lowest rate. People are surprised when I say this a lot, but we tend to never go with the lowest cost carrier because it's not the right recommendation. The recommendation is who's going to service this freight at the right price. And it's usually not the lowest cost carrier. It's usually the right carrier in that market. I'm trying to think of a good example. If you're in the grocery market, if you're selling to grocery warehouses, there are carriers that will give you really good pricing, but they don't do well in that market. So you're going to get tough deliveries. Or you're going to make that delivery, but it's going to be late because the grocery warehouse doesn't approve your carrier. You end up with a chargeback from the grocery warehouse. So you may think, I'm getting these great rates, service, it's okay, but we're working with it. But on the back end, you're getting all of these chargebacks, which is a cost of freight at that point if it's for carrier failures. So really understanding what that means to you and your business and building those relationships. If you're a shipper and you're in the model of find me the cheapest truck every single day, it's going to break your supply chain. You're not going to get the service. So it's super important that you understand who's in the market from a transportation perspective that can manage those shipments and do them the right way.
What is a chargeback?
So a chargeback is if I'm C&S wholesale, if I'm a grocery market and you deliver to me and my appointment time is 2 a.m. and your carrier comes in at 3 a.m., that's a fine. I'm going to fine you for being late. I'm going to fine you if your carrier doesn't show up for his appointment time. I'm going to fine you if the carrier shows up for the appointment time, but the pallets are turned the wrong way, so our folks can't get the freight off the truck. And that chargeback, the shipper doesn't get a bill. The grocery supplier or any retailer, they just adjust the merchandise invoice. They cut it short. They say, I'm deducting X, Y, and Z from this merchandise invoice because you had these failures. Your carriers had failures on your deliveries. So you don't even have a good chance of even, refuting them. And now what's happened is we have clients who actually have departments to manage all of this. So if you're doing business with Walmart, you've got service commitments that you have to meet, and they're getting worse. Now you used to have a 2-day window, now you have a 1-day window, and you're measured on that performance. And if your performance slips, you may not be doing business with Walmart anymore. And a piece of that performance is carriers, routings, and deliveries.
Well, so a lot of costs can be tied up in carriers or your truckers, as you're saying. If you're a shipper, how do you go about sourcing them so you're not hurting your retail relationships, for one? I mean, obviously, Walmart's a huge place. They have a ton of leverage. They have leverage over everybody. You may not always like what they do or their chargebacks, but do you want to be on Walmart shelves or not? And if you do, you're paying that invoice. So you have to prevent this, right? You have to prevent this on the carrier side. So is that what you're saying? You come in, so you try to vet carriers that can get them there. Is this a huge issue? I imagine a place with Walmart with small windows, shippers have to be seeing this all the time.
It's a huge issue, and not just with Walmart, with most big box retailers. But it's funny. One of the funniest statements I've heard is we had a CFO, we're sitting in a meeting, and he comes in and he says, "Hey, great news. We just got Walmart as a customer." I was, the room erupted, and he's like, "But I got some really bad news too. We just got Walmart as a customer," because they're very difficult to do business with. And, all of the other big box retailers are following suit. It's not just the Walmarts of the world anymore. You've got to be really good at understanding your supply chain and understanding carrier utilization and what's out there and what assets are out there. And, there's now a whole lot of new consolidation programs. So if you're not shipping a full truckload to a Costco or a Walmart or Trader Joe's or Best Buy, there's now an emergence of consolidators who are really honing into these markets where they're working through cross-dock facilities, they're consolidating these Walmart shipments, and then they're bringing Walmart full loads of miscellaneous shipper freight. So if you're in supply chain and you're responsible for these carrier relationships, but you're also responsible for a lot of other things. You got to make sure you've got the right suppliers you're buying from, how that movement is, what are those freight terms being negotiated, your inventory levels. There's just so much going on in the supply chain today that having someone either in-house or external that really understands carriers, I think, is crucial to any supply chain.
How do you go about doing that? How do you help the shipper that is having this issue? They're working with the carrier. You're hearing that common neg of, I'm already working with somebody. How do you approach them, or what can you bring to the table, and how can you solve that kind of a problem? Are you benchmarking shipments? How are you selecting these carriers?
Yeah, so typically what happens is you get just that. I'm already working with somebody, because they assume that we're a 3PL or we're a broker, which we're not. So usually the first discussion is, we are a freight management consulting firm, and companies hire us for a number of different reasons. But, they either have a freight spend, they have no idea what it is, or they have a freight spend and they just don't know how they stack up in the market. They have customers who are complaining about late deliveries. They have customers who are complaining that from day to day, we have no idea who the carrier is that's delivering your freight. And, when ABC Trucking comes in, it's a perfect delivery. When you send XYZ in, it just falls apart. Why does that happen? Who are you using that keeps bringing me different trucks? We don't like it. Or from an inbound perspective, there's continual late shipments. So what we do is we'll benchmark that for them. We'll say, okay, you're working with somebody. How are they doing? How do you measure them? What are the internal processes to benchmark that? And so typically a company will hire us to do just that. We'll take shipment data, their current pricing, and we'll tell them, we'll do a benchmark, what we call a benchmark audit. And it's not a negotiation. We don't go out to the market. We'll sign an NDA with the company, and we'll run through a benchmark study. Depending on mode, there's a number of different ways we do it. We use technology, but we really use our expertise. So because our core of what we do is negotiate, we know what the market is. And if we look at a benchmark audit, we tend to have clients shipping like industries, like lanes, working with the same customers, dealing with the same vendors that are shipping inbound. So we can provide a pretty in-depth study of here's where you are and here's what's available in the market. And that's usually the first step. From there, client company will say, okay, this makes a lot of sense to me. And we're going to benchmark an apples to apples comparison. But then we're also going to offer some recommendations, whether it be, I notice you're using this carrier in this lane. We see some options that might be better suited. We see your current transit in this lane is 3 days, and you do have some 2-day options for not more for same price, right? Or you're shipping 3 LTL shipments in a given week to the same customer. Is there any ability to combine those orders, move it as a truckload? So we'll make some recommendations outside of just what they're doing. From there, if there are opportunities, whether it be to improve service, improve price, they'll say, okay, help us then. Bring us through a carrier negotiation. So they'll retain us to participate and help them negotiate their transportation rates. And it's a set of deliverables. It's all timed. We time it all out through a negotiation timeline. And we really develop a strategy with them. If they say to us, here's how our supply chain works. Here's our forecast over the next 5 years. Here's our growth. Here's how we want to be positioned. So we really want to understand that. This isn't give us data, we'll go out, price it, we'll give you prices back, you decide who you want to use, and then off and running. Again, we see our core responsibility is to really making sure we find the right carriers to meet the service requirements and then negotiate the right price.
We've all met bad brokers and bad carriers. You've identified the problem, you've benchmarked it, either your rates, your time, your chargebacks aren't good, maybe all three. When you're putting together the RFP or whatever it may be to pick these new partners for your prospective client, how are you sourcing them?
We're sourcing them mainly because we're talking with them every day. And the interesting part of that is, you're saying there's good carriers, there's bad carriers. However, sometimes it's really perception on the shipper. Sometimes it's, I had a relationship with this carrier 10 years ago and their driver was a jerk and we're never going to use them again. And, and 10 years later, they're a different carrier. They have new customers and they're doing new services and they're offering new product. And sometimes it's just a learning exercise with your client, actually, not your carrier. And, the world is getting very small in terms of carriers. In the less than truckload market, you're down to less than 20 that are in the market, asset-based, performing well. And we're negotiating about $500 million a year in freight. So we're working with these carriers all the time. And the other thing we have a good handle on is carriers, sales reps may come in with carriers or brokers and they say, I want all the freight you can give me. The reality is they don't. They're really good in some lanes and not so good in others, right? And what they'll do is the freight they don't want, they're just going to price higher, which we see them as they just price themselves out. We don't even go there because we understand where they're good and where they're not good, and the freight they want and the freight they don't want. And that comes from years of working with these carriers. So oftentimes you'll find you're working with a local account rep in a given LTL carrier. Well, we're working with executive management and their VP of ops and their VP of pricing because we're not just running through rate RFQ exercises. We're saying, what's going on in your line haul? What customers have changed your line haul? What's going to help you? And, now I sound like we work for carriers, but we want to make sure that the carriers are getting freight that they can service well. And the freight they service well is usually the freight they want, right?
You bring up such a great point, too. And I think it's because of the disconnect with sales and operations that you've seen a lot of brokers in 3PLs. And I worked for a 3PL, and you would have your boss say to you, go to such and such a client. And you'd say, well, that's great, but they have 1,000 TEUs. This office has 7 people in it on the operations side. If we get this business, we might be out of business in this office because we can't handle it. Or it's not even going to be business for this office because it's going to have to go to one of the main offices or a farm or something like that to take care of it. So is that one of the things you look out for too? Because that is a broker trick. They have an office in Boston or New York, but it's really a shell office. There's only a few bodies in there.
Right. And so our big thing with the carriers is you don't make a commitment without capacity. And I think what you're speaking to happens a lot in the truckload market where, you may be working with a C.H. Robinson or an XPO, which are very large, robust brokers, but they have these offices everywhere and they don't necessarily all communicate. And even in, as you said, the NVO market, there are NVOs everywhere. Sure. And even the larger ones, you'll find you have a great local office that just does a tremendous job of communicating well and servicing clients, and then another office who doesn't. So, at the end of the day, the client makes a decision as to who they want to use, but they usually ask us what our recommendations are. And if we know we're looking at a very large NVO and they're going to be serviced out of their, Seattle location, and we know in the past that Seattle location has had some problems, we're going to be vocal about that. And so we're going to make sure, we need a strong person managing our client here, because we want to make sure the communication is met, the expectations are met, and the service is met.
I would hear shippers say that all the time. When we deal with your Boston office, it would be great. But when the freight goes through New York, the service just isn't there. And there's usually a reason behind that. And typically, especially with NVOs and 3PLs, it's because it's an account that's revenued to Boston. So when it goes to New York, it's a hassle to that office because they don't really generate the revenue on it. It trickles right down to Boston. So they don't care as much. You also bring up a good point. Carrier consolidation. The steamship lines, they just form the big alliances. The carriers with the trucks, there's less and less of those. You said there's only several major ones now. There's only several major steamship lines. So why are there so many NVOCCs, and why are there so many? There's like thousands of NVOCCs. What purpose do they serve?
I think it's the reach, right? So if you're an importer and you're in Groveport, Ohio, and you do 1,500 TEUs a year, you don't have the reach to the asset where the NVO does.
Yeah.
So the NVO is negotiating larger contracts over multiple steamship lines. If you have 1,500, you're not much to a steamship line. So if you find the right NVO, they can be very, very valuable partners. And they also bring if you're working with the right ones, they're going to bring that expertise of compliance and brokerage and help you with HTS codes. There's a whole lot that goes on into international shipping. And when you're a smaller size importer or exporter, you don't necessarily have that in-house expertise. So again, I really feel like sometimes I drive this home too much, but whether you're in an international or domestic market, it's why it becomes very strategic and not just about price. I think when your process is, I've got to reduce costs and I want to use the lowest cost carrier every day, you're setting yourself up to fail when it comes to service and when it comes to strong relationships with providers. If carriers see that you're just rate shopping and it's just an exercise for you, there's no value there. And you're not going to get the value that you need.
Yeah, you can't really leverage transaction. You can't leverage one container at a time or one shipment at a time. You have to, when you're approaching people, these RFQs or these RFPs, those get real traction. Those go into boardrooms. Those go in front of people because you're promising them multiple shipments. Because as expensive as people think freight can be, the margins usually aren't that huge. I'm sure sometimes you find when you're going through invoices, someone is getting ripped off. I find that when I was going out finding customers. It's usually good for business when you find that out because you can help the person out and you can change that. But what are rates like right now in trucking? I know that we've heard capacity's been strained. I know the hurricanes were a big problem. So what is the market looking like right now? What are shippers facing and what are they dealing with?
I think for shippers right now, you're probably in the midst of one of the worst markets. Really impacted is the truckload. The capacity is just not there. And if it's there, it's in the wrong places because of all this weather. That coupled with this hit date of the e-log devices, that's got carriers really constrained and concerned. So right now, you're in a carrier market and you're struggling with capacity, mostly in this truckload market. And it's another reason why you really need to have a strategic approach to working with your carriers, because when times are tough, they will stand by you. They will absolutely stand by you. When times are tough and you're out shopping freight and rate shopping and, you don't have real relationships, that's where a typical $2,500 truckload lane becomes $5,000 in this market. So really, are shippers paying more even in a solid outsourced transportation negotiated solution? Yes, but they're getting the help that they need from their carrier providers because they're in real partnerships with them. But it is definitely, since '93, one of the worst markets that we've experienced here at Aborn. And I'm pretty sure everyone else could probably say the same.
You mentioned the ELDs, the electronic logging devices. Those are coming in December. And I've read a lot of news posts and blog posts, especially trucker forums. There's ELD or me was a big trending hashtag on Twitter. A lot of truckers are furious about it. They're really against it. What are ELDs and how do you think they're going to affect the industry?
So the large carriers are already using them, right? So I think that industry will stay intact, although they're still saying we're going to lose productivity. Absolutely. So rates are going to rise for that reason. In addition to that, and this is the drive that we have with clients, is you got to make sure when that carrier bumps your dock, your freight is ready. You're going to load him. He's not going to wait. He's in and he's out. That's going to be key to getting good rates in the right lanes with the right carriers. The other thing is we do a lot of work in, can we set up a drop program so you're not retaining these drivers? Drivers get paid to drive. And with these new e-log devices, they are measured from minute to minute to minute to minute, and they want to be driving. So the more you can keep them on the road, whether it's, we have a client today who has started an additional shift. They do a major amount of truckload, and they're going to increase the ability to get those carriers freight ready, staged, and loaded within an hour to get those guys out of there. And then their top heavy lanes where we have the ability to set up drop equipment programs, that's what we're doing. They've even gone as far as purchasing a yardman and a yard spotter so they can run this equipment around. And what they're saying to the carriers is, we hear you. We want you to be productive and service our customers, and we're going to help you to do that. We're not going to tie you up here anymore. And other carriers are just saying, we can't do business with anybody that's going to tie us up. So it's a real problem. And the one everyone keeps talking about is, I think, even a larger problem, and that's driver retention.
Yeah.
They say right now that average age of a long-haul driver is 59 years old. People just don't want to drive trucks anymore. And so we've got a real problem in the industry, and the carriers are working diligently to figure it out. How do we make this more attractive? Obviously a local pedal driver, but even still, there's just not enough folks that want to drive trucks today. You
bring up a good point about the docks too, and one of the reasons they absolutely need the freight there is because, the ELDs, they don't change any laws, but they enforce a law that people probably were skirting when they could calculate themselves. That's waiting at dock time. So now with the ELDs, when you turn the key, the clock starts. You have 14 hours left in that day, and I believe you get 2 hours those are breaks. You get 12 hours of drive time, but you can never stop that clock. That clock just keeps going. It goes for 14 hours continuous.
Right.
So you could take a nap, whatever. That's cutting into your 14 hours. Then you can't start that again for another 10 hours.
You got it. And when you look at the truckload market, I think Hoover's reported that 27%, only 27% of the market is handled by the top 50 carriers. So much of truckload market is assets with, 7 trucks, 5 drivers, really small. These carriers, one, they may not even invest in the equipment of the e-log. They're going to put themselves out. This may be when they shut themselves down. And even with the e-log devices, again, that's an added pressure for them to try to get capacity and the right kind of capacity. You just can't leave those guys sitting around.
A big event just happened. Tesla unveiled their electric semi-truck. It only has a range of several hundred miles. It's not going to go, it's not going to go across the country for you just yet. But Tesla also works very hard at making vehicles autonomous. And it's pretty obvious the end game here is to make electronic autonomous trucks a reality. And it seems like they're probably going to get there sooner than later. I would not be surprised if it's normal to be booking freight on those types of trucks by, 5 years from now? By 2022? That's not mind-blowing at all. But once those start moving, that'll probably have a drastic change on the industry, wouldn't it? How do you think that'll affect capacity and rates? And obviously there's going to be driver strikes and probably going to lose a lot of drivers. Unions won't be happy.
Unions will not be happy, right. And I think depending on mode is how you're going to see this. I hope you're right. I hope it's soon. I think it'll be a really exciting time in the industry, and I hope I'm here to be around for it. I agree. It's going to help the market in a lot of ways, but there's going to be some issues on the back end, just as you said, whether it's drivers. And there's still so much testing, I think, that needs to be done, I would say, as an industry and as a consumer. There's, just a regular person driving a car. There's a lot of concern about these very large pieces of equipment on the road with no one behind the wheel, right?
Yeah, and there's, especially for safety concerns, But if I'm a smaller carrier, my biggest concern would be cost of entry, because these things are going to be very expensive at first, but the big companies are going to be able to convert fleets in mass very, very quickly, where there's going to be a barrier to entry that they just cannot afford. You're going to see there's probably going to be a ton of carrier attrition, and there's going to be even more consolidation. But we might even see tech moving into that space where these brokers and carriers used to be, just as you've seen it in other industries where they've encroached in. Amazon has come in and taken over book and retail. In the music industry, Spotify came in and took the music industry from the music industry. I think something like that is coming to freight, too, on all ends. Because that's not just the only tech is autonomous trucks. We're also seeing things like blockchain come in, which would kind of simplify some of the aspects of brokerage that 3PLs are already doing. What is your involvement in tech right now, and where do you see that moving to?
So we could do a whole show on
We should
technology.
do a webinar on that, shouldn't we?
We should.
I think we may.
We should. The technology piece it's absolutely crucial, but it's also crucial that you're using it in the right way. And so what we see coming in the industry is, what do they say? The Uberization of freight. And it's this whole digital matching. And there's a need for that in the market. And you're seeing it with Convoy. You're seeing it with Uber. But that's a real small percentage of freight that's actually moving. Most freight moving is being moved under outsourced transportation, and it's under a negotiated agreement. So this digital freight matching, and that's just the entry into the market. I'm sure these folks are thinking of the bigger picture of technology. That coupled with, these optimization tools that, you have a transportation management system now where you can rate shop, you can optimize, you can benchmark. All of that technology is very, very important, but you still need the expertise to look at it in the right way. So the digital freight matching makes a ton of sense when you've got an expedite shipment, a volume, a shipment that normally would move less than truckload, but becomes a volume and doesn't really work in the LTL environment. You can then go out and digitally find a carrier to match you to this freight. What it lacks, predictability, right? You're kind of by chance hoping to grab a truck. It's excellent, though, I think, for the market because there are so many of these smaller truckload carriers. They're literally driving the trucks. They don't have a sales effort. So these mobile applications and this technology that's coming in, that's allowing these carriers to match themselves up and given lanes that work for them, I think is terrific. As a shipper, you just want to use the technology in the right way.
That's a very interesting point, because I think there definitely is this scare factor of the autonomous trucks and the long-haul trucking and the ELDs and the older truckers that are causing attrition. It's going to be very tough for these smaller carriers to compete. But you just brought up a very good point that they could use technology to their advantage. Don't be afraid of it. Go and embrace this, because this could be a key component of the market space for you, especially when you're getting generations of people in offices now who are more comfortable not picking up the phone or having that relationship. They have a relationship with a cloud-based computer program that matched them to something. Right. And the carrier would be rated on there, just like your Uber carrier. It would be 4.5, 5 stars. Okay, this seems perfectly fine. I'll let whoever this is go pick it up. But like you said, too, that's not going to work in Walmart situations with chargebacks or situations with real delicate windows and real delicate time frames.
Agreed. Yeah. And again, I think there's a need for it. But when you look at the overall market, it's a small percentage of what's really moving in the market on these trucks. And that, and then with the whole optimization piece, too. What we've seen in our space, so if you we're consultants negotiating transportation rates, right? And we kind of get bucketed into this 3PL environment because they're doing the same thing. They're being paid differently, but so we go to work for a client and they ask us for an RFI. So give us a request for information. And we've also asked these 3PLs, these 4 3PLs for an RFI as well, right? So they're participating in an RFI to actually hire someone to help work with them to manage the freight. And now what we've seen is, in addition to 3PLs in this market, now you have tech companies in this market. And so they're coming in and they're saying, look, we're going to help you because we're going to be able to bring you all the visibility to orders as they become shipments. And then we're going to give you the visibility to all your rates and all your carriers. And even in there, you can go and do this spot market freight digital matching, So it's all there under one roof. It's terrific technology. But if your freight rates are bad from the beginning, you've got bad freight rates coming in and bad freight rates going out.
Sure.
And then you put an optimization on that. And yes, optimization makes may make more sense because your rates are really already too high, right? So technology it's a must. Using it in the right way is also a must, because I think what happens is you can set technology and technology can make bad decisions, and over time it isn't looked at. And so day in and day out, utilizing technology without any really expertise on and knowledge of how freight moves and how carriers work, you're depending too much on technology, and then decisions are being made and they're being made poorly.
Who is your perfect client? If someone's listening right now, who should be getting in touch with you that's driving to their family's Thanksgiving dinner and they're like, am I thinking about this stuff? What should their supply chain look like?
All right. Well, first off, we don't know anybody who can deliver the turkeys to Thanksgiving. So hopefully that's already in the oven. But it's interesting. It's a great question. We get asked it all the time. And we have clients who are spending hundreds of millions of dollars in freight a year. And we have clients who are spending $1 to $2 to $3 million of freight in a year. And it, again, because being a consultant and really viewing ourselves as employees of our clients, we can help them with a lot of things. So, as I said, on a high level, we're benchmarking transportation costs, we're negotiating with carriers, we're on deck, we do a whole, you can imagine, freight touches all departments. So we do all kinds of analytics and reporting. We're doing freight accruals for finance. We're doing vendor cost studies for purchasing or merchandising. We're doing sales for sales. We're doing cost per pound year over year, month over month, quarter over quarter by customer. So, we're touching all departments. We have clients who have logistics, supply chain, traffic departments, whatever you want to call them, of 200 people, and we support them. We have clients who don't even have that function, and we are the function. So we're actually bringing orders into our TMS, our transportation management system, and we're doing the load planning function for them. So we're either we can handle it from beginning to end, or we can support an existing client's function for them.
What type of cost savings or time savings does someone see? What's kind of your pitch on that? Let's get to the real meat of it, though. What are you going to do for me? What are you going to save me here?
Right. Well, so you're a finance guy, and that's absolutely what you want to know. And so we see cost reduction anywhere between 10 and 35%, depending on mode and depending on spend, right? And it's interesting because you could have a client who has a $3 million spend, and they're in really good shape, and there may be 10% there. Or there could be 30% there because they just didn't have the in-house expertise to help negotiate that pricing as it should be. And it's the same the other way. You have a client who has a $250 million spend, and there's 10 to 15 to 20% there. But it's really with the right carrier providers, because service is first. The last thing you want to do is turn over a program to a client that's broken and they can't implement it, right? So it's always the struggle between operations and finance about get the lowest price. Nope, we want the best strategy. And there's still going to be cost reduction. It's easy to say from a sales perspective that we're hired because we can reduce freight cost, but we usually stay and we usually stick around for a long, long time. We've had clients since 1988. Jordan's Furniture is a great example. They've been a client since 1988. And year over year, we're able to maintain and reduce freight costs for them. But what we really do is help them solve problems. We really understand the market, and they know that. And they rest easy, especially in times right now where the market is turbulent and things are tough. They are comfortable knowing that we have an understanding and knowledge on how to get these things done, even in bad times as well as good, right? And I think the other thing we don't talk about a lot, but, we just ran through a very large carrier negotiation for both truckload and LTL for a very, very large consumer company. And the other value we drive is how quickly we can get it done. Some of these projects internally take companies 12 months to implement. If we've got a good commitment from the client, we can go through a strategic negotiation and deliver results within 12 to 16 weeks. That's meaningful. For budgeting, we can really turn these things around pretty quickly and drive results faster.
Fantastic.
Yeah,
Jill,
it's fun.
Jill, you mentioned technology, and we don't have a ton of time to go into it. We covered what you did, but You have a webinar coming up December 6th. It's going to cover technology. If people want to join in on that webinar, would they contact you? And if they were to, what would be the best way to do so?
So reach out either email. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can find us at our website. We all, like everyone else, have that contact us page. But the webinar I'm really excited about, if you really want to hear a good discussion about what technology is doing in the market and then looking at it in the right way. Again, we're, at Aborn and Company, we truly are freight people, for lack of a better term. So it's this whole technology piece has been really fun for us to help clients to find the right technology, but then use it in the right way. They're very robust applications, and you can get really lost in trying to figure out how you want this technology to make the right decisions for you. And we can help you do that. And so this webinar is going to be super fun. I'm really excited about it. And, I don't know how we promote this, but if anyone had questions ahead of the webinar, that would be great. So we make sure that we can cover those as we run through it.
Sure. So they could go to abornandcompany.com, go to the contact page. If you had a question you wanted to front load, you could email Jill. It's J Carney at abornandco.com. So that would be JCARNEY at ABORNANDCO.com. Just ask her for the webinar link. She'll send it to you. It'll be live. I believe it's also going to be recorded. So if you can't make it, you could always get the recording of it. Jill, wait, what are you cooking for that? I didn't ask. You're hosting. What is your responsibility?
So
turkey?
I'm hosting. No, my brother's doing the turkey.
Ooh.
I am on turnip, squash, and apple pie.
Sounds delicious.
Yeah.
You'll
I'm
have to
excited.
save me some.
It's one of my favorite holidays. It really is. I love it.
I love the whole rundown. I love the whole season. Yeah.
And you get to do it all with family, which is most important.
We sure do.
Yeah, it's great.
Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you for having me.
No
This
problem.
was fun.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Tim.
Well, thank you, Jill. That was a great talk. I hope that brought some clarity to you. If you're a shipper, freight forwarder, broker in the industry, a little bit unsure of what a 3PL is, what a 4PL is, what a consultant is, where they all work and operate within the supply chain and what they bring to the table. Aborn & Co. does great work. I know the folks over there. I can personally vouch for them. Abornandco.com is their website. They have that webinar on tech coming up, Tech in the Supply Chain, December 6th. You can sign up for that at abornandco.com, or as Jill mentioned, you could just email her, jcarney at abornandco.com. If you feel more comfortable emailing me, feel free to do that as well. info@theshippingpod.com. You can also reach me there for any general questions. Our website is theshippingpod.com, where you can find this episode, our last episode on the Jones Act, all of Season 1. In addition, we are on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, Overcast, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, and everywhere podcasts are heard around the world. Twitter, @theshippingpod. Instagram, /theshippingpod. Check us out over there, always putting up some great photos, relevant content to the episode. If you enjoyed the show, you can give back in one of two ways. Subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes. You can find a link to that within the show notes. Or if you'd like to donate to the show, you can visit our site at Patreon. That's patreon.com/theshippingpod, patreon.com/theshippingpod. There you can donate in any number of tiers you'd like, help support the show. Visit that site and you can see what it's all about. Join us in 2 weeks, as our next episode is with Brian McNellis, Senior Vice President of Film and Soundtracks at Lakeshore Pictures. They've done a number of soundtracks that you have heard for Best Picture winner Moonlight, Stranger Things. He is a longtime industry vet, and we are going to discuss digital disruption and how it affects industries. And I can't think of an industry that was hit harder by disruption than music. Brian's a veteran of that. He was in the industry before Napster happened. He was in the industry as Napster happened. He was there as iTunes took over, and now as Spotify has taken over. He survived it all. And digital disruption is something that I have stressed many times is coming to the freight forwarding world. It's already on the horizon. Our talk is going to be fantastic. Check it out. 2 weeks from now, next episode of The Shipping Pod. This has been Tim Dooner for The Shipping Pod.
Yeah, we all love Turkey Day. It's a day to celebrate. paradigm, the weather is